Hi everyone. We are starting our the fourth edition of our AI webinar series, and I'm Adriana de Souza Silva. I'm the director of the Center for Transformative Media. So I just wanted to say a few words before we start. The Center for Transformative Media is this interdisciplinary research hub dedicated to investigating the transformative potential of media technologies in shaping grassroots creativity and promoting social change. As part of our mission, we explore the many creative ways in which media technologies interact with societies, and that includes understanding how emerging media technologies transform society, our creative potential to develop new media technologies, and also the ways in which communities use technologies, emerging technologies in creative ways to improve their lives conditions. Particularly, we have a strong focus on this idea of AI as media, which this webinar is one of its main manifestations. And that entails understanding AI as a cultural and communicative force that shapes creativity, knowledge production, and civic life, and also how it transforms urban spaces, storytelling, journalism, community engagement, and society. If you want to be involved with our center, there is a QR code there on the screen that takes you to our website. You can check out our website. We have always our events listed. You can also sign up to our newsletters, social media. If you are at Northeastern University, you can apply for center membership. That's also through our website. And we have bi-weekly brown bag lunches. And we have monthly events. This is our last event for this academic year, but we're going to pick up again in the fall. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Nora Suren. Nora is an assistant teaching professor at the Department of Communication Studies at Northeastern University, and she took the lead in organizing this webinar. And Nora is going to introduce the speakers now. And so Nora, the word, it's with you. Let me just stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for AI influencers and the future of the creator economy. I'm Nora. I'll be moderating today's discussion. Just like a background, this session is, like Adriana said, part of the Center for Transformative Media's AI webinar series, and today we're going to focus specifically on this rapidly evolving concept of the AI influencers, the rise of AI influencers, and these synthetic content creators. So we're at a moment where these boundaries between human creativity, algorithmic production, and platform-driven visibility are becoming increasingly blurred. And AI-generated influencers are obviously new tools, but they're more than that. They are shaping what we understand as authenticity, labor, identity, influence. So we're going to raise some big questions with our three speakers today. We will think about what happens when influence is no longer tied to a human subject, or how do we think about trust and authenticity when this type of AI content becomes normalized, even in politics, and also what are the implications for power, representation, inequality in digital culture. So we will begin with short presentations from each speaker, then move into a roundtable discussion with the speakers again, and followed by audience Q&A, and we'll close with some final reflections, like key takeaways. Now I'm going to invite each of our speakers to speak about 5 to 7 minutes. But first, I'm excited to introduce Seo Yang, assistant professor of political science and communication studies at Northeastern, and she's also a faculty affiliate with the Internet Democracy Initiative and the NU Lab. So Sunny's work examines how digital technologies are transforming political communication, and today she will be speaking about how political figures are increasingly becoming influencers, especially using AI tools to kind of like expand and manage their online presence. And she will also explore how automation, micro-targeting, and what she calls synthetic engagement are reshaping democratic communication, authenticity, and even political desire. And Sunny, yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen first. Okay, can you see my screen? Is there any issue? Okay, great, awesome. All right. Yeah, thank you, Nora, for introducing myself. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sunny Yang, a faculty member at the Northeastern University. So my research typically focuses on the social and psychological impacts of the digital media. And today I'm excited to discuss the phenomenon I call the influencerization of politics. So I want to start with a question I think should unsettle anyone who cares about democracy. In 2024, a wave of AI-generated images began circulating across Truth Social, Telegram, and X. They show Donald Trump crowned in golden light, surrounded by the visual glamour of the divine authority. So he also posted an AI-generated photo this Monday on his social media platform that describes him as a Jesus-like figure, and Trump reposted many of them. So the Donald Trump joined TikTok in June 2024. Within 24 hours, he had amassed more than 5 million followers. Then in 2025, his administration brokered a TikTok deal that gave Oracle's Larry Ellison the Trump ally controlling interest in TikTok's US operations, including the power to set content moderation rules. The president who joined the TikTok as a content creator become the president who controlled the TikTok as political instrument. At the same time, the AOC and the Bernie Sanders were filling stadium across the country on a tour. So AOC raised $9.6 million in the first quarter of 2025. That's her highest ever fundraising quarter, nearly double her previous records. And it was driven almost entirely by social media virality and AI-assisted list building and audience targeting. Her team has been spending millions building a grassroots digital infrastructures that functions like a creator economy machine. So identify the audience segment, optimize the message, deploy across platforms, convert the engagement into donations. So this is not traditional organizing. This is content marketing for political power. And in Texas, the congresswoman launched the Crockett Creators Influencer Network, a formalized roster of content creators who receive excessive access and posting opportunities in exchange for producing campaign content. But the most revealing detail from this case is not the creator network itself. It's that according to reporting in The Athletic, the Crockett argued internally that she deserved a senior Democratic leadership position on the House Oversight Committee, partly because she had the largest social media following in her caucus. So think about what that means. Like social media following is now being treated as a form of democratic capital, as a credential for influential institutional power. Follower count is replacing mandate. So across party line, across ideologies, across regions, the same logic is at work. So the political legitimacy is now being constructed through algorithmic visibility. And AI is the engine scaling that construction. So 37% of Americans aged 18 to 29 now regularly get news from political influencers on social media. 200 content creators were credentialed at the 2024 Democratic National Convention, given the same access as journalists. And 44% of the American under 30 say TikTok is one of their primary news source. This is not a trend. This is a structured shift in how political information moves and how political power is performed and accumulated. This brings me to what I think is the most philosophically loaded question in this whole debate. What does authentic even mean anymore? Traditionally, we assess the politician's authenticity through unscripted moments, the gaffe, the stumble, the genuine laugh, the biography they didn't rehearse. Authenticity was about the consistency across time and the embodied presence of a human being who couldn't fully control their own image. But now, look at what's on the right side of that comparison on screen. Trump AI God figure images weren't extant. They were optimized visual arguments about the kind of the authority he embodies, not elected authority, but divine authority. And they were produced and distributed at scale. And AOC's fundraising machine runs on AI-assisted audience segmentation, knowing which message, which emotion frame, which platform format will convert a viewer into a donor. And her warmth is real and her empathy is real, but the delivery infrastructure is algorithmic. And Crockett's creator network exists to produce the curated on-brand content that generates the appearance of the broad organic support, so which is then used to justify claims to institutional power. So if warmth you feel toward a candidate was engineered, and the authenticity that moves you was A/B tested, and the community you feel part of was algorithmically cultivated, were you responding to a real person or a product? Now I turn to what I consider the most urgent threat to democratic integrity in this space, the synthetic engagement. I define it as the use of AI to simulate popular support, manufacture consensus, or drawn out authentic opposition at scale. There is one specific form, four specific form this is taking in US politics right now, the AstroTurfing 2.0, before the 2024 New Hampshire primary, AI-generated robocalls mimicking the Joe Biden urging 5,000 voters to stay home, resulting in a $6 million FCC fine. This AstroTurfing 2.0 uses cheap, scalable tools to suppress participation by faking official messaging. Likewise, I have limited time, so algorithmic capture, the TikTok deal 2025, and the platform suppression. So the Meta replaced independent fact-checking with the community notes, while YouTube relaxed the moderation and TikTok began banning the critics. Like these coordinate removal of the guardrails allow fast, cheap, and targeted AI-generated content to compete directly with authentic speech on a leveled field. And the AI got figured imagery, as I mentioned earlier. So I want to zoom out now and make a structural argument. Everything I described so far, the creator network, the synthetic engagement, the AI-generated theology is now possible by a deeper shift in the relationship between political power and the platform infrastructure. When politicians control the platform or align with those who do, the algorithm becomes a political instrument, not the neutral distribution mechanism. So the pattern across all these cases, TikTok, X, and Meta, is the same. The distinction between the platform and the state is collapsing, and when that distinction collapses, the algorithmic feed becomes an instrument of whoever hold power. I have limited time, unfortunately. So I want to make a broad theoretical argument before I close. So look at the transformation on screen. Each of these shifts represent the change, not just in how politics is communicated, but in what politics means. Like traditional public diplomacy operated through the institution like a press office, embassies, formal channels. Now we have AI-mediated digital labor. And the broad messaging try to reach everyone with the same message, but the hyper Local micro-targeting reaches each person with a message calibrated to their specific psychological profile. So you and I might be seeing completely different version of the same candidate optimized for our own emotional architecture. And the policy as a platform meant you voted for someone because of what they say they would do. But aesthetic as identity signal means you vote for someone because of how their image makes you feel about who you are. The Trump God figure imagery is the purest expression of this. It says nothing about policy, it just constructs an identity. And the rally, the town hall, the embodied public gathering has been supplemented and in many cases replaced by algorithmic feed presence. So this matter because desire is not private. The political desire is constitute of the democratic self-governance. When that desire is algorithmically engineered rather than organically formed, the question of the democratic legitimacy becomes genuinely unsettled. Okay, so the influencerization of politics means that the tools of the algorithmic desire are now being deployed to make you feel something about the nation, a leader, a political future. And the tools are so good and so fast and so cheap that the distinction between the organic political movement and the algorithmically manufactured one is becoming impossible to see from inside. Then when algorithms decide what is desirable in democracy, then who govern the algorithm? That is not a rhetorical question, it is quite constitutional ones, and we are running out of time to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. That was great. Now we will hear from John Wihbey. He's an associate professor at Northeastern, and he's also director of the AI Media Strategies Lab. John will situate AI influencers within what he calls a post-authenticity era, which is a shift where audiences are less concerned with whether that content is real and more concerned with whether it is useful or meaningful. So he will argue that the real risk is not the individual deception, but a deeper structural issue, which is the erosion of shared standards for truth and knowledge. And yeah, John, looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora, and thanks, Sunny, for a great presentation. I'm actually hard pressed to top that because in many ways, Sunny, you and I have like very similar ideas. But th this is great, and I may just riff a little off of my what I was going to say because I do think Sunny has sort of put down really effective intellectual markers. All right, so I am, one way to frame all of this is to think about media history, and maybe I'm gonna raise like sort of two frameworks. One is this traditional debate about how technology will inevitably lead to some kind of takeover or authoritarian state. And if you thought about sort of mid 20th century, there were kind of two competing versions. I'll give you a nice AI generated image here. On the left would be the kind of Orwellian version, George Orwell, in the Vision in 1984, where a kind of authoritarian, strong state would put its boot on the neck of humanity and keep us down. And the other is the sort of Huxleyan version of a kind of Brave New World where various sort of uh, drug enhancing and kind of comfort and ease themed technologies sort of lull humanity to sleep. And so that would be on the right. Um, Let me just go back though a slide. So this is sort of, a lot of people are concerned with existential risk, X risk. I mean, some are so concerned that they're throwing Molotov cocktails or whatever's happening, very unfortunate events happening in the world. Um, and that is the Orwellian version. I guess the extension would be killer robots and Blade Runner and Terminator and whatnot. But I am thinking, kind of per what Sunny is saying, that maybe the Huxley vision is the one that may ultimately prevail here. which is the we are all frogs boiling in the pot, to mix the metaphor. One thing I am really worried about, and I'll get to influencers and social in a minute, but it's just this idea of knowledge collapse, where we see a kind of progressive narrowing over time of the sort of available set of information within a distribution. We've all experienced AI overviews through Google, and we see how there's a certain kind of narrowing of what knowledge may come to public attention and be salient there. And I'm very much worried about long tail information being lost. Long tail information often is, only half correct, but it's often useful. There's signal there. There are minority perspectives. There are things that we may not know that could be very important in terms of overturning mainstream understanding of things. I'm also quite worried, per what Sunny is saying, that this whole, I don't know, sort of primordial stew of what it means to be human. So our unrevealed preferences. There are often things that we don't say that we actually believe for all kinds of social norming reasons. Our tacit knowledge, our emotions, our gut feelings, our sort of hopes and dreams. These are not all part of the training data. And they're often only revealed in emergent ways as we interact with other humans. And it could be bots too, but I am worried very much about a kind of flattening and homogenization across the web. The dead internet theory, kind of, which was very hypothetical, I think is becoming more and more of a reality. Just to frame this a little more, there is, there's a future in which almost all public knowledge is mediated by chatbots and AI agents. If we sort of skate to where the puck may be going, and I do wonder if what humans believe to be true and worthy of attention ultimately is going to be AI mediated in every single way at every single level, and I think that's quite worrisome because we do require, I think, under the conditions of democracy do require an informed citizenry. We do need to keep refreshing that knowledge of what it means to be informed. So those are all sort of contextual things that I want to tee up, and then actually I'm going to skip ahead because it's a little dense. So I said there were sort of two frameworks I wanted to surface from media history or sort of cultural history. The other one is this huge debate over medium and message, which begins with, McLuhan and Innes and extends through to our present day, which is how do the affordances, how do the features of the technologies that we are embracing and consuming, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 hours a day, how are they in some material sense, in some deep intellectual sense, like actually the content itself? In other words, there is a radical entwining between medium and message in the modern media era, and I wonder and this is maybe a provocation, but what happens if AI is indeed a sort of general medium in the way that radio and television and internet were? And what happens if it undergoes a kind of normalization, which Sunny gestured at? What happens when we start to apply emotional heuristics? The same emotional heuristics that we apply to real persons and situations. What happens as our critical vigilance decays? I've spent the last decade and a half studying fact checking, content labeling on social media, working with journalism organizations, working with social media organizations to try to like hold on to like what was left of like normative, like empirical truth. And now my mind is sort of being blown as we might date this whole thing to the rollout of GPT and late 22, but then I think the slop, I don't know what we want to call it, the slop pandemic or something that happened in 2025. It became the word of the year for, various word of the year awarding organizations. And so there's a lot going on. I have a working paper and I'm going to stop here, which is called AI Influence. It's up on SSRN. We're still trying to find a place for it. But I think starting to think about AI in terms of sort of mechanisms of influence and then amplifiers of that influence and then the consequences of that influence and starting to really drill down on the various ways in which particularly social media may amplify um, different kinds of messages that lead to real world consequences, health consequences, education consequences, economic consequences. I think that needs to be very carefully studied. I have a lot more to say, but I'm just going to stop. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, John. And now finally we'll hear from Christine Tran, who is a poet, performer, and also assistant professor at Alberta University in Canada. So Christine brings a critical and also creative perspective, focusing on platform labor, gender, race, and today she will specifically discuss the precarious promise of Gen AI through Twitch cultures, highlighting phenomena like forever streams, synthetic exploitation, and the continuation of gendered and racialized harms in political economies. And I'm so excited. And Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Nora. Can everybody hear me good? Great. And just a minor note to clarify, I'm at the Alberta University of the Arts, which is a different institution than the University of Alberta. That's not your fault. It is quite confusing with to be situated with that. And in lieu of slides today, in the effort of transitioning us to this conversational stage of the webinar, I'm going to change the tone of this totally real setup I have here for a minute. Does anybody see this? We're all seeing this. Or perhaps I could show us from my real apartment from another angle. Here. I think in the interest of reducing eye strain, I'm going to talk from here. So put up your hands if you recognize this background. I see little hands, physical and virtual. So this is from the infamous 24/7 live stream on Twitch titled Nothing Forever, a kitschy open AI coded forever stream that was a parody of the American sitcom Seinfeld. For those for whom that was a little bit before their time, back when the TV used to be more of a box, you would come to watch schedule of the programming and see this man, the real person, this AI model, this AI figure is modeled after him, named Jerry Seinfeld, go through various adventures with his friends Elaine, George, and Kramer. And I want to start from this particular case study because it is often perhaps the most, until recently, defining story people would use when they want to talk about how generative AI tools and this idea of creative content without creators, without humans, click it and automate could go wrong, because this particular channel, founded by the creative collective Mismatch Media, within 4 months of operating from December 2023 onwards, whereby both sound and animation and some forms of audience interaction totally automated this 24/7 program, it delved within 4 months into this automated Jerry Seinfeld here, releasing transphobic, anti-Semitic, and racist punchlines. And when the creators apologized, they blamed it on the dilution, their reliance on a cheaper, more efficient version of the code that circumvented that moved past their ability to moderate and govern in enough real time. And while they did return after a 4-week ban, if you go onto this channel now, this channel has now been called a shell of its former self, as Jerry and Kramer stand around, sometimes actually screeching through microphone feedback. So when I give this example, you might think, what is the appeal? Why, as Sunny and John talked about, with all these tools, when we talk about AI tools in this new creator economy, we often view them as vehicles to hyper accelerate production, to create new modes of audience interaction, to parrot Jerry Seinfeld on the voice. What is the deal with AI in these particular environments? And I'm so glad John gave us the invitation to talk about media histories, and I love that term, slot pandemic, because what I want to talk about today is thinking about the harms AI can do in these influencer and creator economic contexts through my own positionality working as a critical humanities scholar as well as a feminist game scholar. Fields, when you're studying games history in particular, that make you spend a lot of time thinking about how claims of realness and authenticity can be weaponized against women and racialized creators in particular. As somebody who spent the greater part of the pandemic talking to Twitch streamers, examining how they compose their domestic spaces to resonate with audiences as they narrated games. I encountered many stories by which aspirations to authenticity, resonating as real, required all sorts of emotional, technical, as well as physical work to perform professionalization. And if we think about the slurs in terms of leverage to delegitimize women gamers' participation in these spaces, it's things like e-girl, fake gamer girl, those with feigned passion for their games. At the same time, it is often disinvesting in authenticity that allows women streamers and women professional gamers to safely participate. Think of using AI masks or other chatbots or even physical costumes to obscure their identity, to let them opt out of performing those like real present performances of biography as a means to protect themselves, to conceal their environments. Doing this work in the pandemic, examining the analog lives of gamers, I think brings to surface something we can talk about in the discussion, and I'm glad John pressed upon about how we are continuing to define authenticity and even evaluate it as useful or not as these tools develop into the future. As Dr. Yang outlined, right, politicians, yes, are increasingly tasked to be social media creators, and I want to challenge and further discuss about how this onus for the politician to also be a civic content creator was beta tested, not just now as AOC uses AI tools fascinating to curate online audiences, but when in the pandemic, politicians like her were practicing their imposter face while playing Among Us to record-breaking live streams during the pandemic, and from AOC's Among Us streams to the Biden Island debut of Animal Crossing on Twitch. Games have often been this both technical and imaginative space for creators and politicians of all scale to brush up and test what authenticity means and who gets the tools to leverage it. And that's something we want to consider as Twitch as a gaming site is also becoming this imagined and physical site to witness harms. Since 2023, Twitch has had a problem with the proliferation, much like the creators of Seinfeld, this code that supposedly moves faster than the ability of humans to moderate with non-consensual synthetic deepfake materials. So when non-consensual materials are not just posted as a microblog or a standalone video, but performed and enacted in real time, that raises whole new, necessitates a new framework for how a platform and moderators approach things like content moderation, platform governance. One of the biggest scandals in 2023 of a variety of streamers streaming non-consensual AI synthetic sexual materials of his colleagues had that material not as the central feature of his stream, but actually playing in the background and as another monitor. As we recognize the different layers in which digital, seemingly ephemeral work happens, so too must we also revise where we visualize and imagine AI is happening in the home. And on the note of these forever live streams, I think as we move past the popularity of something as nothing forever now and witness in the VTuber space, creators like Neurosama, an AI VTuber animated personality whose voice animations as well as chat interactions are completely powered by AI suites like Vidal, as these digital puppets come to step up and take the place that fully marionetted Jerry Seinfeld used to occupy, and likewise, like in the case of Neurosama, recently get banned for Holocaust AI-generated tirades of Holocaust denial and anti-woman suffrage. So too, I think it isn't necessary, as John called, to take up these media histories and recognize how we've seen these narratives of demanding authenticity and who gets to be authentic as beta tested before. And in this broader discussion of influencers, I know like you'll think that in order to understand something like the Little Michaelas on Instagram or the Tilly Norwoods also on Instagram, I don't know if she's made movies yet, before we can understand these so-called hyped up success stories of the AI creation without human creator personality, we also, I think, must recognize these smaller key failures, not just in terms of content moderation, as with fake Seinfeld here, but in the larger way that claims to and demands for authenticity have failed women and people of color and have been the threshold by which they have been denied participation. So I know I'm running a little bit out of time, but I just want to conclude conclude with these provocations. I know I sent Nora a particular question about, I'm very interested as we enter this conversation to how do we expand what media histories we're going to acknowledge as setting us up for those taken for granted vocabulary terms we've been leveraging in this conversation, or at least I have, when we are thinking about those tools. How can we have a history and shared understanding of slop or digital authenticity without recognizing not just like the political economy in which we encounter these tools, but also maybe our own individual memories? Because I know your first encounter with generative AI was not a Jerry Seinfeld or Tilly Norwood or Lo Michaela, but maybe Chess AI, Player 2 in Mario Kart. And I am so looking forward to delving into those histories with you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all. Those were fantastic and very thought-provoking and very timely presentations. Now I want to open up a roundtable discussion among you by kind of like connecting some of the bigger themes across your talks. First, I want to ask all three of you. We're hearing a lot about this shift toward synthetic and AI generated content, especially in political and influencer spaces. So my question to you all that do you think this saturation could lead to kind of fatigue where audiences begin to distrust all content online? Like, and if so, what does this mean for participation? Maybe more for like as citizens, audiences, or even creators.
That's a good question. I'm sorry, did somebody? I think it's important to recognize that a question raised in the context of what types of distrust are we already bringing? Like, is this a rise of synthetic images adding a top to? Because preceding the advent of these synthetic images, I'm thinking that it's funny to be having this conversation in the background where multiple states and governments are seeking to limit who can participate on social media with age bans. I'm Canada. In Canada, we're discussing already tabling a bill like we're seeing in Australia. And that to me suggests that these conversations of distrust and these bills have been in the works for like more than a decade before like OpenAI was like a glimmer in our eye. And I think that line we're trying to draw here, to draw from John's great point about invitation to talk about media histories, has to be understood in that context as well.
Sonny, you go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I want to point out about that the voter fatigue. I guess eventually the cognitive cost of just distinguishing what is authentic from those artificial like a political content uh like becomes so high, I guess. So I guess eventually the rational citizens stop trying like which one is the authentic one, and eventually those exposure to those fabricated content does not actually reduce the trust in false information. It also reduce like the trust in accurate information too, I guess. Like I- it's quite gloomy picture, but AI saturated those types of like things likely accelerates this generalized distrust rather than creating something entirely new, I think. Yeah, so I think the result isn't just a fatigue so much as like disengagement from online political information as a credible input to political judgment, I think. Yeah.
I mean, one thing to think about is the many of these questions in a global context. So across, 200 different nations who have very different norms and different degrees of the very different media histories. Thank you, Christine, for liking that term. Not mine, but definitely I think appropriate here. And the ways in which, whether it's AI slop or AI political disinformation, um, are going to interact in just very different cultural contexts. And so what may be benign and sort of like or cringe or yawn, in one society may be like quite explosive and, have a kind of punch or power in others. Um, I think, but to answer your question about fatigue, Nora, like I also think that there are um, there are ways in which we're already seeing kind of slop fatigue across the American public, for example. I have to think if we were able to peek over at what Meta and Google and whatnot are seeing on their data analytics, that they have a sort of slightly different sense of like how much can you tune up the AI, bears jumping on trampolines and other like more harmful, and at what point do people start thinking it's not funny or useful and is like so 2025. Whereas, in other countries, there may be just like very different reactions. And we know that for a lot of the big tech companies, it's the global markets where they're making their money now. And so the decisions that are being made about what to permission, what's allowed, how much can you get away with synthetic, parodies, where's the line with non-consensual imagery around private citizens. It's going to get really tricky really fast. I'm sure it already is, but I just want to put that all on the table around the sort of the global differentiation.
Yeah, and actually building on that, John, specifically, your idea of post-authenticity paradigm is really interesting and very relevant now. Like if audiences increasingly kind of like evaluate the content based on usefulness rather than authenticity, then what does authenticity even mean in the creator economy now and also going forward? Is it becoming irrelevant or is it being redefined? And like, what does it even mean? Yeah.
Well, I was totally fascinated. Christine, you have a really powerful take on authenticity and its uses and abuses. So I actually would like to hear more about that if you don't mind, and then I'll weigh in. But yeah.
Yeah, when you said post-authenticity, like my brain went to that as such a useful way to describe in my field work some of the tactics that women use to obscure and lean into fakeness as not just a mode of, yeah, self-protection from obscuring their domestic features to avoid being doxxed or not talking about like where they go to work or even costumes, or some people are using VTubing as, again, another obscuring technology to put that barrier, but as a mode of self-branding. And I have a note here that I don't think made the little presentation I gave, but there's like two venues when you're trying to build out a media history into a projection or prediction about technological developments. There's often like two places you can find the canary in the coal mine, like the game industry and the adult entertainment industry, both of whom are, real battlegrounds right now to discuss, yeah, the ethics of synthetic image use, but also offering creators tools. I'm thinking OnlyFans creators who offload AI chatbots to handle the emotional labor of engaging with their audiences for them, as well as in the gaming industry. A project I'm working on right now is looking at histories of OnlyFans and other sexual content creators that leaned into the aesthetics of gaming and if you're going to call me like a fake gamer girl that uses my body in not suitable for work ways to game attention, fine, I'm going to be leaning into it. Kotaku did some interesting coverage a few years ago about women who reclaim the term e-girl, like an online esports slur, as part of their branding, and that involves adopting fakeness, being post-authentic with dyeing their hair really pink and leaning into certain makeup aesthetics. And look, they've been able to obscure, what they might look like when they're buying groceries on the street, but also like those who more earnestly engage with creating a hashtag authentic brand. It's the same strategy of like a snake eating its own tail. And it's like as much as self-distinct, it's kind of moving past the maybe earnest intentions of post-authenticity to just find their own niche in the market by disavowing the call to be authentic, but still in like measured ways. I'd be very curious what's in the Sunny's work that's
Yeah.
so fascinating about if that post-authentic framework could apply to some of the political I almost said political creators, like they're elected politicians using creator tools.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, my research is more about like detecting those like a tactic, like a visual imagery tactic, how they just deploy specific imagery. I mean, think about like this Monday, the Trump just posting that the Jesus like the AI generated images, all of those curated. He might have intention or he just for fun just posted. I actually do not know his true intention, but yeah, there's a lot like a massive like a team behind. Like how they use those social media and then as a political content creator and how they utilize those. They also hire a bunch of content creator to post some like endorsement of the specific policy or something. Yeah, basically just to see some visual patterns. And as for that, the authenticity, yeah, it's really obscure how we catch the authentic image of the politician from those like online activity, their online activities. Like the John mentioned that maybe people just do not care about whether they authentic or not when they evaluate the politicians in the election, but they'd rather just focusing more on like whether they just what their remark about. I mean, their true character online rather than just really like I mean, have some authority figure, but whether they are really fun and try to listen to what they want, how they just try to just get some feedback online, like a one-on-one interaction. Uh, I mean, that would be more like interesting and more important for that regard. Like maybe authenticity is more about the interaction between, I mean, interaction with the voters in the online space. I don't know. It's really hard for voters to just distinguish what is the fake imagery from the true imagery. There's a lot of like examples in the election campaigns, like how they collect the money, like how they collect those donors based on the so-called authentic or the fake image. I mean, that's why it makes a lot of like a fatigue for the voters, whether this is authentic or not. Maybe that would it's really interesting to draw some theories, the John's theories about the post-authenticity thing in the political like communication. I actually haven't thought about that. Um, yeah, combining the
Sunny,
media history.
that's totally fascinating and brilliant. I am curious, even the Trump images are in some ways they still are rooted in a mass broadcast paradigm. Like they're still, it's the Jesus image or like the Pope image. But could you imagine the next iteration, the next generation of like really, I don't know what kind of politician we want to call them, but like I guess risk tolerant politicians, like just training digital twins and avatars to kind of run around, like
Mm,
doing very personalized, I don't know, chatting with people, giving speeches in small towns. Like, I mean, it's sort of if Trump's willing to go this far, I'm sort of amazed actually his media team isn't just like, let's just like unleash avatars of Trump
mm,
everywhere. And
A
maybe it
Trump in
would work.
everybody's pocket.
Yeah.
Like,
One is enough.
And it would be like labeled as like the authorized Trump digital twin or something, and they would just run around doing things, agentically. I don't know. Is that plausible?
like an extended experience AR like Pokemon Go game, but every like
Yeah.
wait, what? How does my Trump levy against like your Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I almost imagine campaigns moving in that direction someday.
hmm
They would alienate some people, but they could measure, I don't know, at reaching other people. But
hmm
seems like
But
we're
I'm sorry. But building on that, like then what point does a politician's online presence then like stop being representative and become just like a algorithmic performance? And where do we draw the line between like okay, fun and like politics and PR is now like entertainment, and but then how like where do we draw the line because it undermines the democratic accountability also.
Yeah, that is a huge issue actually. People do not like policy that the politician present, but rather politician more tend to just make a good image, like creating some, like I mentioned, like the Kristen mentioned, like the Pokemon version, like more like a entertain, like political entertainment is actually highly intertwined with political campaigning actually. People just get attention if the candidate make a very funny gesture or think about the Trump like a hairstyle. Like people keep talking about his hairstyle, not talking about his foreign policy or what they think about the current like a war international or the global politics. They stop talking about that. They only talk about just imagery. Actually, this is undermining the overall the demographic like I mean demographic like a discourse. This is not actually like a funny situation. It's undermine the whole democracy. Um yeah, I guess this AI literally just exacerbate these types of situation, and I'm a little bit really concerned. Even I'm just analyzing those visual politics. The visual politics, they only cares about the imagery, not the real politics. That is the huge issue. I mean, as far as they use the AI chatbot or AI technology, try to listen to the normal people and then adjust their positions based on some of the genuine feedback from the constituent of their uh, like a location. That would be really good demographically. I mean, democratically accountable situation. But most of the time, I mean, just the citizens just use those things, just consume as another types of entertainment, political entertainment. Um, yeah, I'm quite serious about that and quite concerned about the situation.
I'm also concerned about the things Sunny said in in terms of like the privatization of
Yeah.
communication when it comes to interacting with like your civic, these are elected officials, civic representative, and even foregoing the fact that in this discussion of influencer and creator cultures, how like still youth focused, even though like yes, of course, the majority of these tools are catered with the presumption everybody is in that key 18 to 35 or 18 to 49 demographic. I'm just thinking about people like the taking how does the increasing reliance on privatized software suites, privatized platforms for communication from like X to Twitch here. If those are the default modes of getting in touch with your civic representative, what does that mean for what Nora raised as democratic accountability? If you even the means to articulate an opinion or get noticed at all happen from a platform, God, not even acknowledging things like the data privacy concerns. Like, do we need a universal? Sometimes I fantasize a bit the idea of like a truly public, universal streaming suffrage, or like it, because if these are going to be the primary platforms in which you get in contact with your civic officials, does there need to be more conversations about deprivatizing ownership over these suites?
John, did you have anything to add on?
Yeah, I mean, interesting that the election in Hungary, where Orban was defeated, featured a lot of AI shenanigans. Um, and the Hungarian public rejected it, at least if the electoral outcome is any indication. There were lots of attempts by Orban's followers, according to reporting, to use AI to kind of manipulate the emotions and the understanding of the public, and it just didn't, cut through. Now, it could be that there are other explanatory factors behind it, and people are dissatisfied with the economy and the way things are run and all of that too, that made them maybe less susceptible to manipulation. But I think, it's an interesting kind of positive story that, a kind of serious, quasi-authoritarian AI powered campaign just like didn't work. So, maybe score one for the world's Democrats. Small d, yeah.
Um, and now I want to talk a little bit about more labor and inequality. Christine, especially your work reminds us that these systems are not neutral. I know you talked about how OnlyFans creators are using chatbots and they're kind of like using this like fakeness to protect themselves. But how about as AI creators and how as they begin to kind of now compete with human creators for attention and income, what happens to creative labor, like especially for already marginalized groups? Are we seeing new forms of exploitation emerge for especially marginalized creators?
Yeah, I think that's an important, the labor conditions and how like engaging with these tools is also like an embodied performance of not just art of art, but the performance of turning in your interaction with a bot into having exchange value. So it's interesting to recognize that because like something I'm thinking throw back to the pandemic, throw back to the advent of having this coherent idea of a creator economy. Often the idea of having a Twitch channel or a side hustle, as we're encouraged to think about, many of my students are encouraged to think about their social media online, is the premise that here's this low barrier to entry site whereby you can exercise economic and creative autonomy over a space that you wouldn't have in previous institutions. And that's the appeal of something like Twitch. You don't have to know the broadcast manager or have a talent agent to begin monetizing. You just have to put in, about 30 free hours of streaming before you become eligible to monetization. But look how the barriers to entry are lowered. And within that now, we have creators being offered AI suites of like, look how competitive this institution of the creator economy is. Look at this tool that can, let you put on a stream, just automate a full Jerry Seinfeld and go to work on your behalf. Have Neurosama or other AI powered VTubers handle these conversations before you. And within that stratification, I think when we think about the implications on labor, and I'm so glad Sunny brought up that there's teams for these politicians. All this is happening despite the image of like, it's just one click and prosperity shall come forth, new authenticities galore. It's often AI through what's happening with these tools, what I'm witnessing in the AI, and other people have in the influencer economy, it's bifurcating two types of experiences. Those who already have the teams of people to ethically or at least like, streamline and adapt quickly to managing audiences with these tools, and other people that like small collectives like Mismatch Media that are kind of left to, all right, they not had to need to rely on the cheaper version and run into a problem when, not knowing what to do right away when the AI Jerry Seinfeld starts violating terms and services. And as it's interesting to have this conversation right after the rest in peace Sora here, as these tools maybe become fewer and far between, or at least proliferate in new tiers of being paywalled. I'm wondering what labor will that just create new labor classes within the AI influencer economy, where you have these sectors of people who are technically all participating in this thing we call creative labor under the auspices of AI suites, but some people continue to do so with large media trained staff that are able to react, respond quickly, while everybody else is working on the free to play version.
Now I want to talk a little bit about a more like a broader and global question. All three of you can chip in. So, if influencers and political influencers across different countries begin using the same AI tools, let's say, and algorithmic aesthetics, then do we risk a kind of a homogenization of culture where local nuance gets flattened into like globally optimized, platform-friendly content?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, Nora. And I had talked a little bit about knowledge collapse, but sort of
Yeah.
aesthetic collapse is I think what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We need some word for it because I don't want to have to say the word homogenization because it's very hard to say too many times. So we need a new term for whatever this is going to be.
Gamification.
Yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah. I know, like try to say homogeneity like 20 times in a row. And but yeah, I mean, there's going to be look, I mean, humans are meaning-making creatures, and we love new things, and we are excited by new things. And so when things become predictable and static, the tastemakers and the people who are innovators, they're going to create new aesthetics, and I can't imagine that ending. Um, uh, maybe it'll be more of there'll be sort of faster innovation cycles in the aesthetic and kind of optics realm, but I don't think we're going to end there. I think that's sort of like the theory of the dead internet, right? Is that there'll just be a kind of flattening collapse, but I'm unconvinced that that's actually the sort of final point. I showed you the image of the girl asleep with her laptop. We're just like we give up. That's like not really. We're we're like, as I said, we're sort of meaning making. We're going to keep going. I just don't know how, and it's probably going to be very hybrid. But with AI and photorealistic actual documentary imagery. But I'll stop there. Sunny, Christine.
Yeah, I guess actually the Nora and I currently just co-author by just analyzing how good the LLM, the multimodal LLM, just analyzing the political meanings, even that is not the non-English and then the non-American context. The predominantly those AI, the chatbot, all those LLM model is actually shaped by the Western and then English language platform. So if the many of the country, all the politicians or the influencer adopt those AI tool, then eventually, yes, maybe same types of like a technique, I mean, like a strategy or the political culture might be also implemented across all the other countries, for example, like South Korea or Nigeria, Indonesia or Hungary. Um, yeah, I guess the so-called global AI, like what was that? The homogenize, okay, homogenize the political culture. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like a political campaigning strategy first created in US and then eventually spread it across the country. Think about the Trump figure in 2016 and after that, like Argentina or other Eastern European countries or even South Korea, like we always just talk about those types of the Trump figure. And if so, then maybe those so-called global like AI tool try just emulate some of the technique that learned from some American political content creator and then try adopt the same technique to other like a society who are quite, I mean, where it is the political polarization is a huge issue. Um, yeah, I guess the political culture would be more like a more toward the entertainment side and more focusing on like maintaining the good imagery rather than focusing on the details, I mean political like policies or the social issues. Um, yeah, I guess it's more homogenize the political culture if I mean, influence global AI chatbot thing, I guess. Like if Trump just creates those AI generated Jesus-like figure, then maybe some other politicians emulate that types of thing using AI, like image generation tool. They can also post the similar types of like Jesus types of authority in their own account, personal account. Um, yeah, it's totally possible. It's quite the gloomy picture in the global politics, I think, in that regard.
I'm really excited to read Nora and Sunny's work about the homogeneity or like of Western of English and Western media in those data sets because that is no surprise to me, given that within the Twitch world, like these stories that the case studies I talked about in my presentation, it's almost like a standardized trope at this point, using automating a live stream completely. Oh, like the script has defaulted to racism, transphobia, and anti-Semitism. It's reflected. It's almost like these are drawing from pre-coded data sets that have long that pre-existed the advent of these tools in the gaming world and other forms of media. And as we are developing this maybe alternative way to a way of describing the homogeneity of culture, what where I think the phenomena as we're all outlining here is like not just the homogeneity, but the industrialization of creative activity here, because homogeneity is like a characteristic of when you industrialize something, you standardize it. And much like, well, the AI on Twitch might lead to different forms of like gender and race-based harm that might look dissimilar from each other. There's still a standardized narrative and standardized expectation, standardization of risk that creators are asking to take on and be wary of when you enter an AI stream.
I love industrialization. It's
Cultural
yeah.
industries.
It's also easier to say than homogenization. So there's the virtue of that.
Hey, you can almost imagine like the conveyor belt saying culture has to be shaped like this
Yeah.
gingerbread person here, but sometimes
Yeah.
the gingerbread person has a little skirt or a hat.
Yeah. Though it's interesting we're talking about industry because the concept seems almost pre-postmodern or wherever we are. But it's definitely it has a it explains what we're talking about well. Yeah.
Okay, now I'd love to open it up to the audience. If anyone from the audience has a question, they can drop it in the chat. I can read it for them, or they can raise their hands, and we'll just discuss. Yes, we have a question from Claire. Have you seen reporting on actual AI influencers? Is it a financially lucrative path, or democratizing the work of content creation?
That's such a good question. I can't, it gives me an excuse to talk about. I don't know, and Sunny and John can jump at any point. I'm trying to keep being academically measured here, but I so hate, speaking of standardized narrative, the hype cycle that every few months we get this narrative. I'm thinking like Tilly Norwood, even though she's not necessarily an influencer, even though that's her most active creative output platform at this point, where you get this new, usually is almost always a woman influencer that's going to game change the industry and steal jobs from human woman. And yet somebody will tweet, it's so over, quote, tweet something, but it's so quote unquote over an image of an AI generated woman. And then we don't hear about it then we just have its amnesia about her for 3 months and readily accept the narrative that this game changer came in and nobody does any sort of reporting, financialized follow up about how many movies Tilly Norwood has signed, how many of us are actually logging in and engaging, creating authentic engagement with her account. And I think that's such a good question to raise of saying we kind of need more follow-up stories that pop us out of this hype cycle of getting very and temporarily deeply impressed by something a venture capital firm use their journalistic hookup to bring forward to the headlines and then forget about. And then I'm going to bring up like media histories again. We need to remember things past the 2 month news cycle. At least can we at least remember things that happened like further than 3 months, even maybe even 4 months into the past when we talk about how lucrative these tools actually are. I mean, has OpenAI turned their profit yet? Today's the day.
I actually don't know the financials at all. Um, I um, I assume that it's very precarious in terms of being very subject to algorithmic favor or disfavor. Um, and um, I suspect that the same kind of power law, rich get richer, there were a few that sort of win. Winner take all markets, which has characterized really the web and social eras of the past. I assume that's going to be present here, that there will be, a sort of handful of people who kind of figure it out, and people, for whatever reason, love Tilly or whoever else. I mean, there've been a bunch of others created, and that the public will somehow be accepting of that and they can make money, and then a zillion other attempts like just fall flat and don't get any traction. I mean, that's really the story of the modern like media digital ecosystem over and over again, in every category.
Yeah, in the political market, I guess there's some kind of like a demand. I'm not sure whether it is the lucrative, but think about like a faceless, like an influencer in the YouTube. Like we are seeing a rise in the faceless, the political channels on TikTok and the YouTube. So I guess these accounts use AI generated script or the voiceovers or like a deep fake imagery, like push those specific partisan narratives. So I guess they function as influencers because they build loyal, like a microdose audience. But the person at the center is an algorithmic construct, I think. Yeah. So I guess if they target those micro audience, that maybe could be a lucrative, the AI like influencers called feared.
Does anyone else have any questions? If not, I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you all. This has been such a rich and important conversation, and I want to kind of like close with a brief reflection, very brief. So what really stands out, I think, is that AI content, AI slop, AI influencers, and for political actors also are not just a technological shift. I mean, of course it is, but it is more than that. And they represent a deeper transformation in how we think about authorship, oh my God, and creativity and authenticity and credibility and political voice and visibility. So we're moving into a media environment where influence can be automated, identity can be synthetic, and yes, these can be exploited, but the stakes remain deeply human still, especially when it comes to labor, inequality, representation. So perhaps the question moving forward is not just what AI can do, but who benefits or maybe who is made invisible and what kinds of future we're building through these systems. And thank you again for Christine, Johnny, and Sunny. Why did I say Johnny? I don't know. I'm sorry, John, because it kind of rhymed with Sunny. I'm
I love
sorry.
it. I love it. We're like a band, Johnny and Sunny. And
Yeah,
Christine.
but thank you all for joining us today. If you have any closing remarks, feel free to say before we close it. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Nora, for inviting this awesome webinar. Not sure I'm the right person to just discuss, but I generally just research on the political communication and the politician, each politician, they have their own imagery and they are also the content creator. So maybe this is a really good interaction, like a intersection between this AI content creator webinar and the political arena. So it's really great to interact with Christine and then Johnny or John.
I love it.
Johnny
Yeah.
W. and
Or
the AI
Christine.
critical gang.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thanks so much,
Thank-
everyone.
Thanks so much for having me. I wish I could be there personally in Boston to tell you to stay hydrated, get that water before a data center gets it.
I've
Um,
done
All
that.
right.
I'll just say a thank you to Nora and to Claire Ogden and to Adriana for pulling this all together. And I am, sort of on a quest now to figure out like what is the word that will maybe define the new vibe, aesthetic, overall central value that, and if you thought about the old media era, it was probably authority or at least a pretense to authority. And if then it was authenticity for a while, like where are we exactly headed? I don't know, but maybe
Another A
someone in this,
word.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Maybe somebody in this audience or the brilliant scholars who've been on this panel alongside me. I wouldn't include myself in that, but I think we definitely are starting to come up with some new frameworks. It's really exciting, even though the era is a little scary.